Start. Okay. Call to order the meeting of the Board of Directors of the San Ynez River Valley Groundwater Basin Eastern Management Area Groundwater Sustainability Agency. We have a roll call.
Director Circle.
Here.
Director Arona.
Here.
Director Hartman.
Here.
Director Merrimeek.
Here.
Chair Joes.
Here. Okay, item 2. Public comment. Any member of the public may address the board relating to any non-agenda matter within the board's jurisdiction. The time for public comment allotted for each individual shall not exceed 3 minutes. No actions will be taken by the board at this meeting on any public comment item. Any public comment? Anything online, Dan?
Yeah, well, we don't appear to have anything online. We have modified the online participation a bit, based on some experiences that some other GSAs have had with virtual meetings. They've been meeting bombed. They've had people come on, put in explicit material and other things. So we ratcheted down the controls or the authorizations for the online participants. So they're not able to jump in with either camera or audio unless we authorize it. So if there's anybody that's online that you want to have authorization, let us know. Or if there's somebody who's online that does want to provide a public comment or make a statement, please raise your hand through the Teams platform.
Very good. Okay. Let's
And I don't, this is probably, I don't know what would be appropriate, but I thought it might be useful to mention, we had a lot of discussion at our last meeting about the grant deadline. And I know we've shared this with the staff and the board, but I thought we could share with the public that we've reached out to DWR about the potential to extend the grant deadline. And they have indicated that, yes, they are open to extending the grant deadline until the end of February 2027. So it's an 11-month extension on the grant, which is great news for the GSA and the consultant teams that are supporting the work. It allows to be more efficient, allows to incorporate a lot of the great work that's being done as part of the grant into the 5-year eval, and definitely takes the pressure off a bit. So not that we're not pushing hard to get it done, but we do have 11 more months to achieve compliance.
Dan, was that a verbal or did you get it in writing?
An email.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so it's not formal, you'll see later on, we have the contract that for the 5-year eval is still set at the current deadline, but as it becomes formal, we'll then look to modify other formal agreements accordingly.
Did they have any conditions? You said they were open to it.
No, they no conditions other than, they were only wanting to extend it 11 months. But they were also indicated there's potential to move money around in between the grant components. So not really a condition, it's also another additional flexibility.
That's great.
Yeah. That's good news. Okay. Let's go to item 3A, review and consider approval of meeting minutes for August 28th. Any input? Nothing? Do I hear a motion?
I'll move to accept the minutes. I'll second it.
And it's been moved, seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Okay. Let's move to item 4, action items. 4A, review and consider approval of professional service agreement with GSI for the 5-year GSP evaluation. Dan, you want to take it?
Yeah, so we had this item up for consideration at our last board meeting. I'll probably skip over the background unless the board or the public wants me to go through it. Since that board meeting, ag representative or ag director Circle has, along with the executive director, have coordinated with GSI to review the scope of work that was included and has made some recommendations that I reviewed and requested that GSI incorporate into the proposal. And so those modifications to the proposal are included in your agenda packet as red lines, so you can see them. They primarily, they are with respect to, the first one was approach to addressing DWR's comments and and recommended actions, and the recommended actions, corrective actions letter. And then also, an additional description of opportunities to collaborate with the ag director and the agricultural community, to try to identify existing wells in our data gap areas, that would allow us to either, reduce the need for the number of drilling new wells to address data gaps, or allow us to utilize the grant funding that we have for constructing a new well in the data gap area to be constructed in a different data gap area or other high priority area within the basin. And so that's, those edits are shown in your agenda packet. Again, staff recommendation is review and consider approval of the professional services agreement associated with the proposal. And as stated previously, we haven't changed the termination date for the agreement. It currently aligns with our current grant termination date, but we would propose to extend that once the grant is formally extended.
Is Tim nicely? Oh, Tim's there. Okay. Board, do you have any comment? Discussion?
I have a question for Tim, perhaps.
Okay.
The language, there maybe there's some insight to share, but the language, just want to make sure that the language doesn't introduce unended scope. Unended or very, or less defined and more open-ended scope. Sure.
It's fine with me, I guess. I don't know if people online can hear you. I don't know if they can hear you. I just come up here to make sure that you can be heard.
Yeah. Thanks, Peter. Yeah, let's move.
Oh, I've worked traditionally, it's been both. So the inclusion of those words of the scope was intended to provide a little bit of guidance without being overly restrictive. So if anything, it was meant to incorporate some discussions we've had in order to offer some thoughts that were helpful. Wasn't supposed to open up more, it was actually supposed to provide a little bit more guardrails where we think they could be used. Do you have a specific portion of that?
The one thing that caught me, was around task 5, there's a red line that says instead of the assessment of the monitoring network of existing wells, that we would, I interpret it as add, but any additional wells that are available. So to me, that reads very open-ended, or TBD.
Right, so we're trying to thread the needle here, expanding the monitoring network in the data gap areas by whatever means are appropriate, which they could include either installing a new monitoring well, which there is grant funding for, or if the GSA decides that enough wells are found are identified, then it's possible that we could use those wells in lieu of having to install a dedicated monitoring well. But I didn't want to restrict to either both to one or the other. So I was trying to write it in a way that would include both options as possibilities. And the scope will be determined by the GSA. What we do, how we address these things. And so I was trying to thread the needle there.
You also talked about, regularly coming, I guess, to the board and staff with metrics like, schedule, how you're doing, and cost as well. I mean, can you use like CPI and SPI? I'm looking at Mark and Funny right now. He knows what I'm talking about. And that way you can quantify exactly where you are with respect to your plan. And so we would all.
Sure, I would propose maybe the easiest way, if this would work, would be to provide a a progress point.
Yeah, well, you said regular and I didn't know if that was monthly, quarterly or what.
Well, we provide monthly invoices
Okay,
to Dan, and it could include a progress completion on each portion of that, it would help.
yeah, I think that would be,
It's pretty sophisticated and easy to do, so is that sophisticated enough to work?
yep,
Okay, good. I just want to say that, I think that if the wording improves the document some, because if we could find additional existing wells, we could improve the monitoring network with what we have, especially if, that Director Circle has those people who have, are open to offering their wells, from the ag community or others from the ag community that offer ag wells that would be suitable. That'd be excellent. It would fill in the data gaps. If we looked at our plan for 2018, we had lots of wells. Immediately thereafter, we lost access to a lot of wells. These two big data gap areas showed up. And so anything we can do to fill those in, amenable to.
Can you use a production well for a monitoring well?
Absolutely, yeah.
You
The
can,
state has some pretty.
there's no limitations or anything?
Yeah, the state has some pretty clear guidance on how to use that. And we've threaded that needle in other bases. They always prefer dedicated monitoring wells. It just, I just go over it real briefly. If you have an existing well, it has to be in a single aquifer. It has to have known completion. And obviously you have to have other things that it doesn't. So you have to have access to the well. You have to be able to get good water level data from the well, which can all be solved by coordination and technology. But I think we have identified some wells that we thought were good enough that we could use, and there's others that we have been introduced to that we could use. For sure, those are discussions we're going to have as part of this. I think the expansion of the monitoring network is one of the most important things that can come out of this plan.
So these extra wells will help support our own monitoring well and add to the structure, the validity of the data coming up.
Right, yeah, we don't really know what's happening to two big data gap areas since we submitted the plan in 2018. But that'd be great. And I think it's the wording also tries to keep up with that a monitoring well will be installed, the location of which is being decided now. It could be both, I think.
The depot, yeah,
Could be both.
yeah, because our grant is written to put one in,
Exactly.
and our JPA, I'm not JPA, the GSP requires it.
Right. Right.
So,
I think
okay.
that implementation of the plan involves doing both. I think that's what the GSP said we would do.
Yeah, I think that's required in our GSP.
The question came up when it turned out that the GSA may be able to move funds around. And I didn't know what the GSA's desire was for that. What the GSA will do, I don't know. I have opinions. It's you who are the guide in the process.
But it's good to have, I think, your own monitoring well, the EMA, because you know you got it. The other ones, you're up to the whim of private property owners. They may not want you to come back on. They can change their mind, sell their property. There's all sorts of things that can happen on the way to the store, so. Okay,
Chair. Can I say something?
good.
So I want to thank Tim because after our last meeting, he spent a lot of time with me explaining the 37 items and so I think, we came up with some good ideas, but one of which was the monitoring wells and, we found one that's in a data gap already. We found several others that could be candidates for this. And I think we identified that some of those people are a little nervous or unsure about participating just because they have questions, but nobody, they've been asked before, but they didn't understand it. So I think a little outreach, explaining, what a monitoring well is and the same question you asked is can a production well be used for monitoring? And I think just a little outreach would get us some success in those data gaps.
Good. John,
So if we are able to identify some, could we compensate people for offering that? Could we use some of the money from, and could we get a tight agreement that it would be for a certain period of time?
that's a legal question.
And we don't have to answer it now, but I think it is something to explore, how to incentivize people.
It's good.
Yeah, you can look into that. I don't know exactly.
Your budget's got some money to pay for it.
Well,
Not the line items, but it's.
and it might use that money for these.
Yeah.
If you see if there's a precedent for another basin that's doing that.
So there are access agreements, which could be handshakes in other counties that are formalized. And there are also technological solutions that can be used where you can put something there. And then when you don't get access, you can get the data. Which,
Yeah, there also are, confidentiality agreements that can be utilized, and then,
Yeah.
you're one of those that basically you agree to share one piece of data, but no other information, and so, that piece of data doesn't necessarily have to be associated with your property or your well, but it is available for the GSA's use, so.
I think an analysis might be, we might get more wells using that than trying to make our own wells, so it might be worth looking into.
Yeah, no, drilling wells is not cheap as we have seen them. So yeah, any opportunities to reuse existing infrastructure, is,
As
can be
long as
much
we've
more
got,
cost effective.
as long as we got the security of that data, so we can meet our requirements of our GSP, that is significant. I'd hate to see us lose our money for a well.
That's why we want a handshake. We want a contract and we want.
Right.
So the participating, landowners now have an access agreement, which we had sorted through with legal counsel to, debug it and get one that was user friendly. So I know we already have that document and that's what my property's under.
Right.
And so, I think as much as anything, it's just communication on what we need to do, but, I'm sure there are some who would be motivated by an incentive.
So if with that incentive, we could be deliberate about which properties we might be more interested in, more valuable data as versus others. So if we're willing to offer a contract and an incentive, we could be more scientific about who we offer it to. It's a question, I guess.
Fill the data gap, right, Tim?
Exactly, just to fill the data gap.
yeah, we have the two big areas and we have a sense of where dozen good subject wells will be in there. So. And we know who the owners are. Yeah, just one more thought, the access agreement could include methods of communicating with them before you go to the sites, so they're not concerned that people are just gonna come and go all day long. It's every X months, we can coordinate with you ahead of time, you can do a follow.
Dan, are the other MAs putting in, their own wells, like we have planned with their equipment?
Yeah, they have.
Are they
Right.
doing one or multiple drilling?
I think each management area, I may not have this 100% correct, it's just doing one owner as well, and then some are doing consolidators.
Okay, but the grant, I know the grant allowed at least one for everybody.
Yeah.
Just one more question, Tim, for you, because I did this, we didn't change your bid. Is there a not to exceed clause or any, it's not a fixed bid, but I want to make sure we're not signing up for unidentified excess work.
Good question, actually. At the end, I can place or it's checking whether it says, this will not be exceeded without firing.
Okay.
Something, but it's always open. But that is for.
I'm looking for it, but yeah, that is it's the time of materials not to exceed, structure.
Okay,
Chair, I move we, accept the agreement.
let's see, public comment. Okay. Charlotte, is there any public hands? Oh, well, I have one back there. We'll take a look at it. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, sorry. So Matt Young, Sanborn County Water Agency. I just wanted to clarify on access agreements. So currently in San Ynez, there are no access agreements for the wells. The USGS has been monitoring all the wells in the county for decades under a contract with the water agency. Around 2015, 2016, the water agency took over that from the USGS and we do it in-house now. As the GSAs have taken over monitoring, we've devolved certain bases to the GSAs. The GSAs have established their own access agreements with the landowners since this transition from this long-term relationship with the county and USGS to this new entity. So you may be referring to San Antonio, they have access agreements with all the landowners, but here in San Ynez, that transition hasn't happened yet, and so there are no access agreements currently, other than this kind of historical handshake, long-term relationship with all the landowners. So, as you go on this path, it might be a good idea to have your council look at these other areas and develop an access.
Well, actually, I know we did an access agreement for the projects that are underway now.
Yeah, so the new wells that are being done under the grant for the ET analysis and all of that, there are agreements associated with that with TWR requires. But for the monitoring network that's done twice a year by the water agency, there are no formal access agreements.
So that needs to get done.
Samantha, are you saying that the water agency will no longer be monitoring those wells and it will be handed over to the business?
Sure. Yeah, so we're not planning on, we haven't been asked by the GSA to devolve the monitoring to the GSA. I don't think the GSA has the budget for it currently.
Okay.
At some point, that probably should happen, but we're willing to continue to do it for now. We have the budget for it right now.
Had a question there?
Yeah, just real quick, the data gap analysis, right, data gap areas identified, and if so, documented, and where are we going to find that?
They are identified.
Yeah, the data gaps are identified in the GSP. There's, well, Tim can probably speak to it, but there's, sections around data gaps and figures showing the data gaps within the management area.
Peter?
Where it is.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Peter Garcia with ID1. I thought I heard mention, Dan, when you were introducing this item, that there may have been some red line changes to Mr. Nicely's scope that talk about this possibility of not drilling a dedicated monitoring well in EMA. That's not reflected in any red lines, or it's not a change to Mr. Nicely's scope, correct? This is
No.
sort of related discussion.
Related discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, the only red line changes are shown, and they're not shown as red lines in the proposal, they're shown as excerpts in the staff report.
Right.
But yeah, this whole descoping or moving, that's just
It's
for the discussion.
Okay, I just wanted to then maybe follow up on this idea of doing one versus the other. And to follow up on maybe a point I think I heard mentioned, which is sort of the guiding instrument for what we've committed to do is the GSP. The GSP talks about two actions and not in terms of an either or approach. It talks about expanding the monitoring network for purposes of mitigating data gaps. One, by canvassing the opportunity to use existing wells that are currently owned by private landowners to assess their suitability for becoming a monitoring well by doing video logging, looking at if they're drilled into a principal aquifer, et cetera, their casing, how suitable they are technically. But then separately, it talks about a dedicated monitoring well to be installed by the GSP. So it's not an either or, it's a both and in the GSP. And it's a both and in the DWR grant application. And it's a both and in the DWR grant agreement with this basin. And then in the sub-grant agreement among the three GSAs, how we allocated those funds. So I think if the GSA is moving in the direction of doing it either or, it might need to examine whether that requires some modification of the GSP, because there's been a dedication to us installing a dedicated monitoring well for the EMA. And I think it's somewhat related to this idea about if you're gonna obtain an access agreement for a private property owner to use their well as a monitoring well, unless you secure it in the form of a long-term license, will continue to run the risk of losing access to that well for monitoring purposes. As someone mentioned maybe Mr. Nicely, we've run into that already, where we've had our initial representative monitoring network sliced by like a third because landowners have just withdrawn. And we could encounter that same sort of challenge moving forward. So the idea of a dedicated monitoring well is something I think that we should not too quickly dismiss.
Right.
Thanks.
Cause my fear, I don't wanna see us lose the grant money for the well, and then turn around, we need it, yeah, and then our whole plan buckles. I don't wanna see that.
Yeah, and it, maybe others can speak to it, but you know, what I've observed is approaching landowners with legal agreements who are currently voluntarily participating for can be a double-edged sword. Sometimes you can lock it in and you have perpetuity, other times that's the sort of precipitating event where they say, no, I'm out, and they take me off the program, so you just gotta approach it delicately.
It's gonna be kind of like an easement of a pipeline run through your property.
Yeah, I mean, to provide full legal access to get out there and monitor that well, you need access to the site, the permanent, yeah. What they're.
Yeah. Okay. Now, was there any online questions?
If there's any comment online, raise your hand and I'll grant you permission time. No hands are raised.
Okay, nothing.
Just to answer the question from Director Rona, section 7.1 under compensation speaks to the not to exceed contract.
Motion. Okay, on the actual document, if you look at page, what was it? Page 27 of 54, Dan. Okay, you there?
Mm-hmm.
See project delivery schedule. Is that correct? Contracting is expected to be finalized by July of 2025?
No, that's a carryover from when the proposal was originally,
So that needs to be.
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's sort of a qualitative statement. I don't know that it's legally binding, but I mean, we could modify it.
We should have a clean document. Okay, any other? Main board. Okay. I want to make a motion to accept.
Yeah, I'll make the motion to accept with that change.
Okay, Doug makes a motion, second. Second by Joan. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Hearing that. What was that on the speaker? It's the call. Okay. You good, Dan?
Well, maybe some more clear direction. What do you want it changed to? I guess to September?
Yeah.
2025?
Well, we should have an updated Gantt chart of the project plan.
Yes, okay, that's, I think the
Is it current then?
It starts in October.
26th?
Yeah, it's over.
So the Gantt chart was updated, but the sentence around contracting expected to be finalized, should we just remove that? Or, I mean, we can say September.
Whatever, but it
Move that
doesn't
first
read
down,
right.
and then it's added in for 27, April 26th thereafter.
Okay, we'll remove that sentence.
The Gantt chart's correct.
It appears to me with the tasks starting in October.
And in May, or right before May.
It does extend beyond the current contract deadline. So we could modify it. I guess I would request that we wait to hear from, or on the formalization of the amendments to the grant agreement, and then we request an updated Gantt chart that reflects the new extended deadline, the anticipated extended deadline.
You want a reaction to that?
Well, I'm seeing one. we can have them change the Gantt chart, I mean,
Two concerns,
At no cost increase.
two concerns. One is that it's still like, they're open to an extension, so I'd like to still operate as if we're in a hurry.
yeah,
Cause the second thing is, time is money, and if we just take our time, we're likely to run costs up. And then slip out of budget. So I would like to operate like we have a ton of discipline.
Yeah, let's get it done. 'Cause
okay, yeah, I mean, so the legal contract requires to get the work done by the end of March, which aligns with the grant. But we can request they update the Gantt chart schedule to align with that. And incorporate that into the final executed version.
I made my motion.
Yeah, cause aren't some of the others already producing work on there?
Yeah, other management areas have initiated the 5-year eval activities, over a year ago, I believe.
Over a year ago, so we're like a year behind the other ones. So there is a reason to stay on point. Okay. Very good. Okay. Let's move on to item,
Did we vote?
No.
I don't think we voted.
we voted.
Did we?
Yeah, we voted.
We do.
I haven't voted.
I voted.
You said all in favor, say aye.
Yeah.
And I think maybe let's just redo it.
Okay.
How about we do a roll call? That way it's.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, we had the motion by Doug, seconded by Joan. Let's do a roll call for this.
Director Circle,
Yes.
Director Arona,
Yes.
Director Hartman,
Yes.
Director Merrigan,
Yes.
Chair Jones.
Yes. Yes. Very good. Moving forward. Let's go to 4B.
Yeah, so 4B is review and consider approval of well metering and reporting ordinance. This was on our agenda at the last meeting. It's been an item that's been presented to the board at least once, if not twice before then. We've been making incremental, what I would characterize as improvement and modification to this based on input from the board, based on input from the public, input from the CAG. And we had a bit of discussion around this at our last meeting. And so we've incorporated the input from that discussion. In your staff report, there's a bulleted list of the modifications that have been made to the well metering and reporting ordinance. And we have it proposed for the board's approval consideration for adoption.
Okay, discussion. Don't see them.
Yeah, I'm good with it.
Well, you're good with it, or touch that? Didn't hear what you say.
And just discussion on this. It's on this discussion. And see anything from, the only thing I had, just to let you know, that on the, that water code section, is that the correct one? When we talk about like addition on the first page, there. 2954, talk about addition of domestic use definition of water code 660. Is that the proper code for that?
Sorry, what page of the agenda packet?
29,
Okay.
right there, somewhere in your bullets.
Oh, in the staff report, okay.
Is that the?
Let's look it up.
It's not like a Title 23 or something. I'm no expert on that, but
Dan, what section?
10721.
Yeah, I believe that's I don't have the code in front of me. That's they define, Sigma defines de minimis extractor, and I think that's what that's referring to. Let me pull it up.
Domestic use definition.
It's in the definition section.
right, and it talks about section 660.
So, yeah, so California, and California Water Code Section 107.21E states, de minimis extractor means a person who extracts for domestic purposes 2 acre-feet or less per year.
Yeah, it's just the straight definition of de minimis.
Then below that is domestic use.
And that's it. That's Water Code Section 660 then, right?
That's,
So what's the comment?
it's not the water code, that definition of domestic use. It's in Title 23, the California Code of Regulations, Section 660.
Okay, so if we were to modify the staff report, we would change it from addition to the third bullet, addition of the domestic use definition from not water code, California Code of Regulations, Title 23, Section 660.
More importantly, it's the ordinance definitions number 7.
Right, that's the other. One. On page 34, that's where it's mentioned again. Item 7.
Yeah, so, if we want to do it in section 7, section 1A7, domestic use means as defined in California Code of Regulations, Title 23, Section 660, the use of water for homes. Is that correct, the issue?
According to Pater, I haven't checked it.
I'll take mine. It's just
Yeah,
not,
it's correct. It's Title 23, Section 660. Domestic use means the use of water in homes, resorts, and then a whole list of different uses, but it includes domestic uses, certainly.
Okay. All set then?
Well, yeah, we're good with that direction.
Okay. Nothing else from board, public? Yes, ma'am.
Lisa Sever from Sunny Des, Rancho States Mutual Water Company. Just a good question. So first of all, I want to thank you guys. Obviously, a lot of work went into addressing a lot of the questions that came up. So I wanted just to recognize that. But it's still not, to me, it's not exactly clear. So we have like mutual water companies, we have agricultural users, and then we have people. I mean, they can't just be outside of my neighborhood, but have big lawns, they're not growing grapes, but they have extensive landscaping and or a lake or something, and they're using their wells to like fill their pond and water their lawns, as an example. So, are they considered, if you're not a de minimis user, because it's larger than half an acre, that's now the definition, are they by default considered agriculture or agricultural, or is there like, do we need to add like another category? So it's agricultural, which to me would sort of connotate it to commercial operation, somebody growing grapes, selling grapes, growing olives, selling olive oil. But if it's just landscaping, large amounts of landscaping, what do you call that user? Because they're not a mutual, they're not really agricultural per se. But yeah, pastures, that was another thing I mentioned previously, that people were living in pastures for horses. But I was looking just now at landscaping, what would a person, they have to report the irrigation stuff? I guess that's really the question, right, is with the form, so.
Good question.
Yeah, so I mean, if they do not meet the definition of de minimis user, then they would need to comply with the meter installation and reporting requirements.
Including the documenting of how much acreage they have irrigated, so I got a 3-acre lawn, I've got a 2-acre.
I mean, I think what the way the form is written for reporting, it's really focused around agricultural users for the reporting water use type.
So then that's the clarification I was looking for, not interested in pure landscaping and ornamental stuff. Just looking at that. And is it commercial agriculture, and some people grow grapes and sell them to somebody else, some have small vineyards that they make their own wine. So I'm looking at these areas of gray where, where's the line there?
So we need a definition of that type of
That
user.
would be great.
So I think that type of user, well, one of those types of users would still fall under the well-use type of domestic. They're domestic, they're just not de minimis.
But they have landscaping that's domestic, but not de minimis.
Yeah, because they're greater than a half acre foot.
Clarification to make sure that nuance is clear.
Well,
They're not de
yeah,
minimis. And by definition, going with this, and then unless it is domestic use and it's less than half an acre or less of lawn and landscaping, right? So they're not de minimis. It's not really domestic anymore by that definition. And it's kicked into what category? So maybe a third category. And capture that.
yeah, so if you are residential owner who is pumping. Well, yeah, we could try to define that category.
It doesn't need to be residential, it's just an owner of property pumping more than 2 acre feet, what do we call that?
Well, it's that definition of half an acre. It's half an acre less than feet domestic, so you're. And I don't know whether people, how much water they can use, so that 2 acre feet counts. They've got a 2 acre lawn. I don't know enough about irrigation and turf.
I could jump in, and that kind of comes to what we were talking about with CAG, which was really being succinct about how we identify the minimum users. And, we were talking about various methods to do that. And I think to your point, there needs to be some clarity for people that aren't ag, don't know the difference in those. And I guarantee a lot of people out there don't know what an acre is. So I think that's kind of your point, but it's clear that if you're under 2 acre feet, you're de minimis. If you're over, you're not, and you're subject to the regulations.
Right.
But identifying de minimis users is going to be key.
Well, I think that the definition of de minimis now uses, it's very specific to domestic water users, so that would, and they have a definition that says you can't be irrigating more than half an acre of lawn and irrigated shrubbery or whatever the exact definition is there, so that leaves this area where the people with large lawns that exceed half an acre, which I know there are some people that have large lawns that like the pond. And so they're now not considered domestic because their irrigated property exceeds that half an acre. But they're also, maybe they don't have a single fruit tree or a grapevine or whatever, so they're really not agricultural either, just all ornamental. So.
Do we need the definition of domestic use? What we want is the de minimis extractor. We're talking about a person who extracts for domestic purposes. We could define domestic purposes if we wanted to, but do we really need domestic use in the definitions?
I think that's what we got out of that.
Yeah, I think that we had quite a bit of discussion around. I think we all get the 2 acre feet, but the domestic purposes piece was where there was some uncertainty. So we added the domestic use so that you can more clearly understand, what you need to be to qualify to be domestic use, and then you also need to be less than 2 acre feet. I don't, if it sounds like if your concern on the well registration form, one way to address this would be, we have under item 3, on page 42 of the agenda packet, well use, and you know. And then we have checkboxes for agricultural, domestic, municipal, industrial, livestock, water metering. We could add a 6th checkbox for other, and that would capture essentially these gray areas.
Suzanne, look at that form from
For domestic use exceeding,
Exceeding a half acre of lawn irrigated landscaping. Well, they're not domestic use if they exceed a half, but
Yeah, I think that was the whole thing.
it's domestic purposes. Not, I mean,
Non-commercial. Even, there isn't really a category for commercial intent that's not agriculture and stuff. I feel like, I feel like this might not be an issue, 5 years from now when acre feet is more common terminology. And well users who are domestic for landscaping are more attuned to what their volumes are, and that's the surrounding objectives for policy are. So maybe we just capture an other, but we ask a few more questions, like, so if don't think of yourself as domestic and you're pumping more than 2 acre feet, tell us more. What are you doing?
But there really are only 2 categories. Like there's the 2 acre feet, and if it's over that, the fee applies.
yeah, I mean, for the purposes of the groundwater extraction fee, we're not charging different rates for different uses of water.
Right.
Arguably, we're actually not even charging different rates for de minimis versus non de minimis. I mean, it's still the same rate. We have different approaches because the de minimis users, as currently written, wouldn't be required to install meters. But the differentiation is, it does go into the annual report. I think we do need to report by different water use type. And, I think the approach of trying to use water code and other, code references to define these definitions would try to help add more clarity, because some of these don't necessarily have a legal definition.
Tim has some input.
Here it is, isn't it?
Can you speak up, Tim? You talk so quiet.
So our GSP had 4 water use sectors: agricultural, municipal, and reported domestic. Rural domestic is small public water systems. So you have a small public water system that would show up there, but rural domestic can either be de minimis or non-de minimis, or circle. Seems like all of this is rural domestic.
Thank you, Dan.
So now, that raises the question whether our form should match those 4 categories
Right.
and not how it's listed here.
Yes, or I mean, we should think about this in the context of, this is a well metering and reporting ordinance. That may change how we want to categorize things, because the data that we're getting for the annual reports is based on some reported data of the conservation district and other methodologies. And with adoption of a well metering and reporting ordinance, we may be using different categories. So, but yeah, it's something we can think about. We have not gotten to that level of detail in the discussions with the staff and the consultants. But I mean, the simplest thing to do would be to adopt the categories from the GSP, or one approach would be to adopt those categories. And if we need to amend them at some point in the future, that's easy enough to do. We bring back a potential amendment to the ordinance, we add a category and forward. So,
I was just gonna maybe add more quickly that it seems like the whole purpose of this ordinance is just to define whether or not you have to install a meter. And so what Sigma says is we're not allowed to require folks to install a meter if they meet the definition of de minimis. So it might not even matter too much which box is checked here, because if people are going to claim de minimis status, they have to self-certify and they don't install a meter. So they're really not even subject to the metering form. They just have to otherwise self-certify that they're de minimis. So whether you want to add a new box that says non-de minimis domestic or rural residential, it almost, I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but I think for purposes of filling out this form, this is really just, this applies to people who are required to install a meter. It doesn't even apply to de minimis extractors in the first place.
I think that's the same thing I said, was there's really two categories, right?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. if it's
Install a
domestic or
meter, you don't
It doesn't matter which box you check, the same rules apply.
Yes, ma'am.
I think that the point of my question was kind of lost with the addition of the, it seems to me, if I'm interpreting this correctly, if I have a lawn that's greater than half an acre, or my ornamental shrubbery and all that's greater than half an area, I do not qualify for de minimis, whether or not I'm pumping 2 acre feet. Because you could have a lot of, I don't know, like I said, I don't have the experience, but I'm just saying that. So it's not an either or, right? It's,
Right.
or it is an either or. It's not that you have to pump less than 2 acre feet, because it seems to me that the moment you exceed that half acre, you're now out of domestic. It's de minimis status for domestic use. So you follow what I'm saying? So then,
Yeah,
yeah.
Doesn't mean you're out of domestic, it means you're out of.
De minimis, correct. So those people would have to install a meter. So just to go back to my question, they're not agricultural per se, because they don't have any agriculture going on. So do you care that they have 3 acres of turf and not an olive tree or grapevine anywhere? So they wouldn't have to fill out how many acres they're irrigating and whether they're doing it overhead or by drip or sub-grade or whatever it is, which, agricultural people will understand all of that, but maybe not I'll say the residential people who aren't qualified for de minimis because of the size of the lawn.
Dan, can I just jump in with one comment?
Go for it, Steve.
Just that if you recall, when the fee was established, it was really based on it was a volumetric, it's a volumetric fee. And as I recall, the board determined not to set the fee based upon acreage, parcel size, or type of use, merely on the amount of water used, which I think the way this is phrased now, or this is structured now, it's consistent with that concept of basing it on the amount of water that the property owner uses.
Right, that's right, it's volumetric.
Yeah, I mean, so some of this information may be useful for the annual report. None of it does necessarily going to apply to the groundwater extraction fee. So for the purposes of generating revenue for managing groundwater, it's all going to be the same. Yeah, so there are some people that may fall into some gray areas that, as currently drafted, these forms, may or may not, exactly ask them the specific question for them to very detailed delineate their water use types.
So do we need another box to be checked? Is that necessary?
I mean, you put another box there, it's a good catch-all for some other category.
Steve, our attorney O'Neill, what do you think on that? What do you think we need?
On your form,
Yeah, and just addressing this concern here, make it clear.
I guess you could. I'm looking at the first form, Dan, that we have meter information and well use. Is that where you're thinking of adding something?
That's what, right, Dan? It's on that.
Well, I mean, we could add another category there, yes, to capture the, situation where well, no, you're still domestic. I think the current question really, at least that's been posed by the public is, do we want, as I understand it, on the second form, where we list month, there's a table where we're requesting reporting information from the metering. We list month, measurement date, totalizer, flow unit, total extracted,
Right,
and then type of use, irrigated acreage, irrigation system method type, types of crops irrigated. And so there's a statement below there that says irrigated agriculture users only must complete the above fields. And
Right.
so I think the question is, do we want or do we need to have non-agricultural users fill out a similar form or this form based on their different water use types? But as currently written, it's only for agricultural users.
Yeah. So,
frankly, I don't see it as essential to this ordinance. You know, I think someone pointed out the ordinance is designed to determine who is required to install, measuring devices and report that information. If you just had water use type, if I was filling out this form and I was using it to irrigate 5 acres of lawn or landscaping, I would be putting total irrigated acres or types of crops irrigated. I'd probably put not applicable, and then under water use type, I just put landscaping. I mean, I don't know that it's, I guess, interesting information for the agency, but I don't know if it's essential to this ordinance. So I think the table's fine as it is, but it's certainly, if the board wants to make amendments or edits, now's the time.
Seems sufficient to achieve our goals.
what's that?
I said it seems sufficient to achieve our goals.
On the bottom of that form, water user type, irrigated agriculture user must complete all above fields.
Yes, if you'll recall, when we presented it last time, there was a question around who has to fill out this table, because mutual water companies don't really, they have a ready way to be able to fill out a table like this. Some of these
Right, well, what if,
domestic non-de minimis users may not be able to fill it out, so we modified to say, no, this is just for agriculture.
okay,
And so the question is to the board, I guess, do you want that type of information for other types of water users?
we could put in there, I'm just throwing this out here. It says, irrigated agriculture or anyone using more than 2 acre feet.
Yeah.
And then that would put them in, right?
Keep it simple.
I like that.
You like that? Does that make sense?
Question.
Oh, gosh, I got hands. So before we go there, Steve, did that make sense? Steve O'Neill?
Yeah, that would capture it. That would be one way to do it. You could also just delete that parenthetical and they have to fill out what type of, or how they're using the water, right?
Another good point. Taylor,
I would just say, I caution you against putting more than 2 acre feet, because then you have an inconsistency with your definition of de minimis. So again, de minimis is very specifically defined. It's not just defined by 2 acre feet. You can have less than 2 acre feet of ag, and doesn't mean you're de minimis. So I would caution you, the board, against maybe that type of suggestion. Ms. Hayden here, I think, has a very good suggestion of maybe just deleting the parenthetical. And you just have water use type, and then instead of saying type of crops irrigated, you just say type of irrigation. Or type of water use in the last column, and then it captures everyone.
Because everybody is supposed to fill this out, who is pumping more than 2 acre feet, right?
Yeah.
Even if they're domestic water. Like,
If the state requires volumetric measurement, they're not requiring tracking acres of grapes or everything, lawns. Why even put it in there? Why even have that form unless the board needs that form filled out for some type of metric? Doesn't make sense. The state wants volume, that's it. So why even have that form to fill out? It creates confusion and havoc with everybody about reporting.
You'll get more compliance. You'll likely get more compliance if you don't have the complexity.
Yes.
Matt,
So at EMA, they've been metering now for almost 5 years. Initially, all they required was just the volumetric reporting. However, they added a section for reporting your crop type 1 because it helps you check up. So if someone says they're growing carrots, but they're only using 1 acre foot per acre, you know they're lying, right? It's wrong. They're using 4 acre feet per acre. So, and then the other is that it really helps if we want to update the model in the future. It really helps to be able to calibrate the land use types, ET, and with the reported pumping. And get a lot more information, understand what's happening with the basin, how crops are using certain water types, or how certain crop types are using certain amounts of water. And the EMA GSA found it incredibly valuable to have that information as they move forward with implementation of the GSP.
thanks, Matt. Yeah, sounds good. Yes, sir.
Yeah, it seems like some confusion may be coming from, section 1 to H7. So it's not to be half acre in lawn. It's not just lawn, it's just lawn, ornamental shrubbery, gardens, at any single establishment. You might have, 2 acres of really, drought tolerant stuff and be de minimis. So it seems like that, half acre is causing confusion and not necessarily pleasant.
That was part of the definition of some.
Right.
Code.
Yeah, so,
Out of state defined.
so chop it from this one.
We'd have to leave the state definition for sure.
Yeah. Dan, are you following this? I want to make.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's all good points. It's trying to strike a balance, reflecting enough information to make management decisions, but not so much information that it's A, not valuable, or B, a deterrent for people to comply with the regulations. I think I would like to avoid requiring or, implying a requirement that a small residential pumper has to go out there with a measuring, tape, measure out the square footage of each of their, home landscaping types and report that. And the different methods for each of those types. I don't think that was the intent. And this may be one of those things that, as we implement, we're gonna get feedback, we're gonna need to modify and tweak and I think, and Steve, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, these forms are included as examples. I don't know that, and I guess depending on how we improve it, whether they're actually formally part of the ordinance. And, the ordinance says the groundwater extraction form shall designate the following things. We had a request to develop those forms to share them with this group so we could, people could better understand what types of information might be required in the forms. I guess I just don't want to see us get wrapped around the axle on something that,
Okay, so what you're
getting
saying,
away with the overall objective, which I believe, which is for the board to want to adopt a metering and reporting order. We have time to work through this stuff and figure it out. Right?
yeah, because it's what, June 2027?
Yeah, so there's a 18-month, landing strip here before this is even required.
Okay, so that gives us time to refine this and get it to coincide with the needed information. Okay. I like that idea because it sounds like there's some work that needs to be done on the forms. So back to the actual, the resolution, the ordinance here. Any comments on the actual ordinance, but not the form? Anything online?
If there is any comment online, you can raise your hand. No hands raised.
Okay, back to the board. What do you guys? Elizabeth?
My reaction to the form is, I think it's fine. I think we're still informing the, community at large and the public what acre is really all about. So that's gonna be a process, and I think it will become more common terminology over time. I think the point with regard to Kuyama is we really need to take to heart. So part of the deep, simple, but capturing more data in the form helps with enforcement and informing the community at the same time. What are the real guideposts for sustainability? So I'm okay with where it is, and I think it will become clearer over time. The gate, whether you're below 2 acre feet or beyond 2 acre feet, that's really central. You're either de minimis or not.
So then, what if, the form, we have draft forms, but the ordinance is not draft. It is the ordinance that we're gonna approve, but there's attached examples of forms with that.
Yeah.
That will be.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, I think we would want that flexibility
right,
to be able to modify the forms at a staff level without having to amend the ordinance.
yeah.
So,
Okay, so what do we need here now?
Motion that we don't do it.
With. Ever gonna say anything about these forms? Because. So they say they're drafted.
Adding a couple of example forms to freeze some things.
Okay.
I don't think we have to say anything about farms.
No?
They're not part of the ordinance.
Did the water group make a statement about the ordinance, well monitoring? Did they weigh in on this and provide their?
I mean, the warrant is not made, and I support the ordinance the way it is.
Okay.
So, and, I think the forms, can be referenced and changed from time to time or something, because I think you're gonna find when you roll it out, we're gonna have some learnings that come from people who are reporting and,
Oh, yeah.
so I don't know that we wanna lock ourselves into any form.
Right, that's why I thought it's draft, but at the most, they're just example, but. Just don't include the forms then, until we get something finalized.
I move that we approve the well monitoring and reporting ordinance.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion to accept ordinance 2025-3 and a second. Joan made the. Elizabeth second. You want to do roll call though?
sure, Director Circle,
Yes.
Director Rona,
Yes.
Director Hartman,
Yes.
Director Merrily,
Yes.
Claire Jones.
Yes.
Okay, passes.
Okay. Right, now we're going to move to 4C. Review and consider recommendations for ag directed representation at member AEC representative coordination meeting. Dan, wanna do this review?
Yeah, so just some background, on a bi-monthly basis, EMA GSA staff, the executive director staff, and legal counsel, and representatives from the member agencies currently participate in what we call agency representative meetings, to provide updates and coordinate on GSA initiatives, ongoing tasks, prepare for upcoming board meetings. And, these are something that, that I requested as the executive director. This is it's somewhat of a standard practice that I am familiar with and utilized in managing other similar types of organizations. And I think, can be really and are very beneficial for the smooth operation of an organization. And so, at the last meeting, under items for future agendas, there was a request from Agriculture Director Doug Circle to do for the staff to research and present options for the board's consideration for allowing agricultural representation at these agency reps meetings. And so, we went through and brainstormed a number of options that might be considered by the board for allowing this additional agricultural representation at the meetings. The first option would be or considered was allowing the agricultural director or alternate to participate in the ag meetings. And I want to say that, you know, we developed these options and then we reviewed them with legal counsel to make sure that we didn't have any, get ourselves in any, you know, legal predicaments by, you know, any of these potential actions that, you know, we were presenting to the board for their consideration. And I don't know how much detail do you want me to review sort of the dialogue around each of the options or just lay out the options in the recommendation?
I would like to hear some of the reasoning,
What's that, Joe?
the reasoning behind or what, where pros and cons.
Yeah, why don't you go?
Okay, sounds good. So, well, let me just list the options. So option one, agriculture alternate participation in the ag agency reps meetings. Option two, allow the agricultural director or agricultural representative organization to nominate a representative to participate in the meetings. Option three, form an ad hoc subcommittee for specific initiatives, where an agricultural director could participate. Option four, formation of for the agricultural representatives or agricultural users to form a water district that could potentially join the JPA and then as an organization could then appoint their own staff representative. And then option five was discontinue the agency reps meetings. And so as we went through these, you know, again, we met with legal counsel and we just documented some of our notes and thoughts around the different options. Option one, allowing directors to participate, specifically ag directors in the agency reps meetings. We didn't see it as favorable as typically the agency board sets policy and the staff focuses on implementation of the policy. And this would sort of blur the lines by having board members attend what are essentially sort of staff level meetings, and could potentially provide the board member attending these meetings with, you know, more information that could, you know, potentially, I think the term is upset the balance that was used and provide them with more influence in the dialogue and the decision making at the board level. And so in a sense, it could result in a director playing an administrative role in the agency's affairs, which there's no such roles defined in the JPA, either explicit or expressed or implied based on our interpretation. So that was the primary consideration with that option. Option two, allowing the ag director or an agricultural organization to nominate a representative to participate in agency reps meetings. With this option, we identified this is not an uncommon practice. You know, in essence, we're doing that currently with the member agencies. They appoint non-voting members from their organization, or a consultant, somebody that's not necessarily within their organization, but a consultant hired to participate in those meetings on their behalf, to act as a staff level representative in the JPA and the collaborative organizational activities, again, to help facilitate just the overall coordination of the organization. And, so for option two, we thought that there could be an option, and this one was identified as being more favorable than option one, because it does keep sort of the policy at the board level, and then staff representatives at the staff level, and obviously there's interface, but we stay out of Brown Act issues, and then the board is operating on an even playing field. And I'll get back into what that option could look like later. Option three was to form ad hoc subcommittees for specific initiatives. This is allowed under the Brown Act. However, they provided that they're not really a standing committee. They're not intended for like having regularly scheduled meetings. And they're not really intended to be operated in perpetuity. They're intended to have a clear beginning and ending, and those restrictions around ad hoc subcommittees, didn't necessarily meet the intent of the request, which was for ag to have more representation at the staff meetings where we talk about a variety of topics. We typically don't have a dedicated meeting just to talk about one initiative. I mean, we're in an effort to move all of these initiatives are in parallel. We're discussing. Our agendas are 3 to 4 pages long in bulleted form, just with all the different things that we need to cover in those meetings to try to help this organization operate as efficiently as possible. And so from that perspective, we didn't think that was a great option. Sure, yes, ad hoc subcommittees can be of great value if there's a specific initiative where the board wants to consider forming one. That can make a lot of sense, but we didn't think it really fulfilled the intent of the request for having an ag director representative. Option 4, formation of a water district that could potentially join the JPA and then appoint their own staff. This is an option. If the landlords wanted to form a water district, the JPA current members could consider amending the JPA to allow that water district to join as an additional, I guess, 5th member agency. And then, potentially, the ag director position would then be transferred to that water district. But I mean, however the board would want to handle that. But this would require formation of a water district. That's a process that could take up to several years, would require formally modifying the JPA agreement, which would require unanimous approval of, I believe it's unanimous approval of the current board, including the other 4 member agencies. So significant time and money to implement that alternative. And so, while I think that was an option that could achieve the objective, the timeline for something that happened is likely in the years. And I don't think that was the desired intent. It was to wait several years to then have a member while, the EMA GSA is really, it's in its formative years right now, where we're taking on many initiatives that are really going to shape the future of management of groundwater in this portion of the basin. We're taking these initiatives on right now, and they're going to extend probably much further beyond into our management of this resource. And then option 5 was discontinuing the agency reps meetings. And this is an option. It's not a preferable option from my perspective as the executive director of the organization. I find these meetings are instrumental for allowing us to review and refine materials prior to board consideration. It's in these meetings where we tend to catch a lot of things like water code references and other things. Obviously, we don't catch them all, but it's really helpful to have other sets of eyes on these materials that ultimately come to the board's consideration. I would also say, we've been in our role for roughly a year. But this management area has been working on the signal implementation for 8 to 9 years. And so there's a lot of history and context that we don't have. And that I think is very valuable for us in being able to do our job that we gain by having these agency reps meetings. And so, eliminating these meetings, I think, would reduce the efficiency, limit the coordination, and place frankly, a greater burden on you as board members. Because we would likely have to bring items to the board that haven't had the level of review and input that we currently have by having the agency reps meetings. So not preferable from my perspective. So the recommendation from the executive director would be to consider approval of option 2, allow the agricultural representation to nominate a representative to participate in the agency reps meetings. And that's my recommendation, as this would allow us to enhance collaboration amongst the member agencies and the agricultural groundwater extractors in the EMA. We've seen a lot of value that Director Circle and other agriculture users that have engaged in the GSA through the board meetings, through the CAG, through outreach to landowners. One example was really getting the demonstration projects off the ground. We were really struggling to get participants to participate in that program, and then, but through direct outreach through the ag director, we were able to get people signed up and cooperating. Other advantages, it would reduce or eliminate the current need for the executive director to meet separately, as we are now, with the member agency representatives and then the agricultural directors. We're having separate meetings where we cover the same topics or similar topics. And so it's just more time and money to have those separate meetings. So that could be eliminated by having an ag director, staff level representative at the meetings. And so those are the primary reasons for why we're recommending the board consider approval of option 2. To help the board consider what that could look like, we developed one conceptual process for how the agricultural director, or how really ag as a water user, could sort of more formally nominate and present for the board's consideration approval of that sort of agriculture staff representative to participate at meetings. And we tailored this process based on the process that the board had developed and adopted for the appointment and nomination and then approval of the ag director and alternate director that is outlined in the JPA. And so we included a potential solicitation process for this option as attachment A in your agenda packet. And you'll see it largely reads like the process that was included in the JPA for the ag director, but restructured for an agricultural representative solicitation. It incorporates the Semianez water group primarily, but has provisions for potential other ag organizations if the water group was not available or interested in participating in that process. It would be solicitations of nominees. There's certain requirements that could be considered for the nominees. And then certain procedures for how those nominees could be presented to the board for their approval consideration. And that concludes my presentation on 4C.
Okay. Any questions?
I have a question. You mentioned that you ran all these options by or lawyers.
EMA GSA legal counsel.
Yeah. Because I'm surprised, it just, we need to talk through it, but I'm surprised option 1's even offered as an option. Is it legal to have non-agency representation in a staff meeting? Or is there a precedent where that has happened?
Well, let's be, and Steve speaks to the legality question.
Sure, when,
Steve?
yeah, when when this option was first proposed, when I looked at it, first I had concerns, of course, about this kind of imbalance in this usual structure of, in my experience, in municipal and public agency governance, in that electeds and appointed board members set policy and the staff is charged with implementing that policy. And in my view, that would really kind of upset this balance. And then, of course, when you look at the JPA agreement, it doesn't afford any of the board members any administrative role in the district, excuse me, within the agency. So I don't see this as being a viable option.
And I have lots of concerns on that potential scenario, but I just want, maybe while got the floor, because the ag director is not an agency or is a nominated role, or anyone that you would nominate would still be a member of the public. Is that not right?
Well, yes, he's not, the ag director is not representing the public agencies as the Solvang director is, or the Santa Barbara director is, or the other two directors who are, but, the way this JPA is set up, this non-member director, it was the ag director, he does have as much vote as any of the other directors. So they sit in a somewhat unique position in that they have the same vote as the county of Santa Barbara has. They have the same vote power as city of Solvang. So they do have the role, and as a board member, they are also considered an officer. So it is an interesting structure here.
That made another point, but that wasn't my question. The point you just made was that they do have a vote, which was my major concern with option one, is that you have a voting member in a staff meeting, and that would naturally make every other director want to sit in on the staff meetings, and
Yeah.
we're gonna make unproductive instantly. So to me, that's a non-starter.
And I agree with you, just, so I think we can take option one, probably
I think
option.
the reason option one is on here is that, we have the authority to modify the JPA. And I understand we're not willing to do that, but I mean, if we decided we wanted to do it, we have the authority to do it. And so it could be done.
I just want to address that. I mean, if the JPA agreement is going to be amended, it has to go back to the member agencies bodies. It would have to go back to I guess the Board of Supervisors, the city, et cetera.
I got it. I understand. That wasn't really my question. My question is, can you confirm or tell us if we've ever had a scenario where a public representative, because all of the staff members that are working today with Dan in this format are employees of the agencies. So they're specifically agency representatives, they're not members of the public. And that's how I see the ad role today, is representing the constituents of the community that the agency is also serving. So if we put a nominee in that role, then it's the equivalent of putting a public member embedded in the action of executing policy in a staff meeting, which I can't think of a precedent where we've ever done that.
Yeah, with the focus of being that ag representative, because we're not at that, what I call an ideal end state of option 4, where we've taken the white space and we've stood up a new district and they have staff that they could participate in these meetings. So this is all kind of an interim workaround that we're trying to affect here. And we're trying to give,
I'm asking for your, I want to hear from the lawyer.
yeah, that's fine. I'm just saying that I wanted to understand from the lawyer is who approves that, you know, the comment was just made that we have the ultimate authority. We went with option one as this board. Who would approve the nomination of that person? Would that be the executive director because it's a staff role versus a, you know, board policy role? Or would it be this board by default because there is no, it hasn't been.
You know, it would, I mean, I think it's moved at this point as far as number one, at least in my.
Well, I'm trying to understand
Yeah.
too, how two would actually roll out in terms of who would be approving, say they nominated Kevin Merrill. It's like, okay, well, does Dan approve it and with the other agencies saying, yeah, Kevin would be great? Or does that come to this board to make that?
What he's proposing here is that comes back to this board for approval.
Yeah, and then the same qualifications for the director apply. I think in that case,
So-
somebody lives in the district.
So I think that, you know, the key is an effective rollout, of all the activities that we have to get done in the next 2 or 3 years. And with agriculture, you know, now going to pay 80% of the, you know, pumping charges. You know, I think it will be helpful that ag has, you know, an opportunity to participate in the staff meetings where the sausage is actually being made. You know, not everyone in ag is in full support of this, and so it'd be good, you know, for us to be able to have, you know, ag say we're in these various categories. And I think, you know, it's in the spirit of trying to get, you know, get this adopted, get it achieve get cooperation and compliance and so forth, so.
So I understand the objective. Where I'm trying to go and understand for the legal is if there is a non-agency employee acting as staff. That seems really contradictory to what the agency objective is trying to do. And serve the public as opposed to have the public embedded in the execution of day-to-day activities. So if you have an employee that is equivalent in, you know, their obligations, their ethical, their commitment to performance and commitment to productivity, then I think they have equivalent sort of governance over their actual role. But putting a public member into staff, I'm still looking for legal response.
Yeah.
Is that legal?
Right, what would be
Is there a
cleaner
response?
is if he hired a consultant on ag water to be that person in the meeting, and then now it's clean.
So
Is
we
there-
pay for the
No,
agency.
yeah, the
Why
GSA
we
would
pay
be.
for it?
Well, because there's the feeling that optics and that we're missing something in the formation. The policy is only being made by the agencies, but not by the group that's actually paying for all of the GSA, or 80%, I think is your comment. So I'm just taking your argument, saying, well, what if they did that as an alternative? What would people feel comfortable about? I mean, I'll let Steve, you know, weigh in.
Just on that issue of a member of the public director, I understand what you're saying, but you know, we have members of the public, you know, this agency has no staff. You have members of the public acting as consultants, right? That's Dan's firm and his assistants, and frankly, myself. You know, we are
They
paid
have
consultants.
contractual obligations, not paid, there's a implied consequence if they don't perform.
Right, and also, and the difference being here is that also Dan and myself are officers of the agency as your general counsel and your executive director. So, you know, I don't have a black and white answer for you, but if the process of option 2 was followed, you would have had a process where this board took an action to appoint a nominated individual to attend these meetings. Is that person a member of the public at that point, or is that person cloaked in a little more officialdom because of that action? I'd argue probably the latter. But, and I think to address one of your earlier questions, this is a unique situation. In my experience at least, I have not seen this type of structure. I've worked with other joint powers authorities, water masters, et cetera, where public agencies are represented by consultants, usually engineers, who represent that agency at joint powers meetings. But this is a little different structure than that.
So you're saying there is no precedence?
Well, in my experience, I'd agree with that statement. Yes.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, does the WMA Central Management Area in Webster, did they finally get an ag person on your board?
They did not, well, I can speak for the Western
They have,
area, they did not have.
And they don't even have a voting
CMA
ag
does not.
person. Like us, we appointed one, we put a voting in, we give them full support. That's big time. They haven't, so why aren't they doing it too? And there's one inside, there's precedent. I was looking for that. Where is that precedent? And are we stepping into a waiver of privilege here?
We're kind of going off topic here.
No, we're not.
Yeah, I mean.
No, we're not,
trying to
Brad.
Consider
No.
4C, not
This is
what
the,
CMA or WMA are doing.
no, point is, this is not clear and defined.
Right.
And I think this board so far has done an excellent job of including ag. We were out there first before anybody. We went after an ag person. We said it was important. And there were agencies that they didn't really want that, but we put it on, we convinced. And, and we even gave full voting, because there was a weighted vote issue that came up, Brett, that you even came up, that put weighted voting in, not in favor of people who produce water, solving run. And that was bad. That was really bad. But I just really think we have done an excellent job including ag. And I like, if we can make it better, I want to make it better. I really do. I appreciate Dan spending time with you, so you know what's on the agendas, that you can at least, really get engaged there. But I don't want to stick us in a quagmire of legal issues on waiver of privileges or any risks we have.
Yeah, so I guess I'm a little confused as to why having agriculture involved, if they're paying 80% of the pumping fees, why having them involved, just let me finish, why having them involved would be a problem at the staff level, because it might contribute to things that are positive in the implementation. That's what I'm interested in. And if it's not me as the member or, Mary as an alternate, and it's someone else, I'm comfortable with that. If that's, if that becomes a nominated person and, keeps the water in the ditches, so to speak, I think ag can help get this solved, and, you'll find that if ag's helping get it solved, it's probably gonna be a lot better than spending a lot of money on enforcement and, that's my goal. And so I'm not clear why there's resistance to having, some ag input into the process.
I don't have resistance, but I would like equivalent from staff participation, if that's a real ask, then offer up an employee. And someone who's really going to contribute to the effort, the representation of the agency's requirements or interests or perspectives. But staff is where the rubber meets the road. I think Dan said it. It's where you're actually executing policy. So we need to bring doers to the equation. As I'm hoping it's not just tapping into, what's going on, but you're bringing expertise and value and level of effort.
I think we've proved it. We're bringing it.
I do too, and this is working. This is working. I'm trying to find value in the next step.
Yeah.
But that value needs to continue to be on, level or equivalent, criteria. And so if you're willing to bring an employee or a contracted equivalent, then that's for consideration. But I don't feel comfortable making a nomination of someone, yet another person from the public into a staff meeting. That feels like it's, it is. There's no precedent, and it's having your constituents run the agency. Agency is supposed to serve the constituents.
Well, I think the board goes first, right?
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate that staff came up with brainstormed and has these different options. I think 2 is the only option that we could focus on and consider, could we make that work? I differ, yes, the board makes policy and staff has a role, but it's not just implementation. Staff has a role in teeing up the agenda, teeing up options. That was an example right here. And I think what Director Circle is saying is that when those options get teed up and discussed, he would like to see an agricultural viewpoint as part of that discussion. And I agree, it's not clean. It's not what we'd like to see. I guess really it would be better, if we had the time to create a water district. That's a lot of money and maybe a lot of inefficiency. So I find myself thinking that if we had the same process for this staff role as for the director, I would be open because that gives the board, we set what the criteria are. For me, it's really important that somebody live here in the district. And that we have final say in whether we would approve that person or not. And, we could say, let's try this for 6 months and see. If we hear that it's not something, if it inhibits or it's contentious, but I think it could broaden the discussion and give us more options to consider here at the board. Again, I acknowledge it's clunky. It's not the cleanest structure, but on key issues, we need 4 votes. But I'm worried, we saw last time, we couldn't get that. I think we've done a really good job in pulling together. And I think both of our chairs have bent over backwards to engage the public, engage everybody. I'm really proud to be a member of this board and how it's been led. And I think it's important that we keep everybody on board. And I think option 2 is a strategy to try for 6 months and see how it works.
Digesting that. But I'm trying to be an open. I genuinely feel like there are avenues for that are available today. So if expertise needs to be brought, I think anyone can call Dan. And or continue the influence from the CAD, or join any of our staff meetings. To be debriefed coming into one of these meetings, because, again, not trying to change our roles, but I frankly don't have that much interaction with my staff coming into these meetings. I'm probably getting equivalent information that you are, done, maybe less. But I just feel like there are plenty of other options that don't put us at risk or put productivity of the staff at risk or us at risk.
Point. Anybody else having more discussion here? Public.
Could not the staff just bring in someone from ag as a subject matter expert? Maybe that person would just, sit there and can answer the questions and provide input. But I don't know the structure of, what really goes on, but it seems like that's something that happens a lot in business. And if you need to, hire them as a consultant or whatever to make it more official, but subject matter expertise, that's something that, I think is a smart business decision.
Genuinely, I'm hoping Dan's doing that as practice of a day-to-day habit of doing business or doing his job anyway. Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, I don't see us restricting any. We'll take all expertise. We're not restricting.
But to formalize it to meet the needs, because I certainly can appreciate that agriculture, we know that, and it's a fact that agriculture uses a lot of water in the state and in our area, and, it accounts for much larger use than domestic use. So, but I do think it would be great for ag to have an official input, so like a subject matter expert with more of a
You have an equal vote.
rather than ad hoc. So that's just if there was some way that, again, to stay within the legal parameters of how these things have to operate. But, what other, like, out of the box opportunities could you, use that will be part of a normal staff situation, because you can't have every subject matter expert on staff, so.
I like the subcommittee idea, but that, and that can be topical and it can be formal or informal, but it almost doesn't need to be that formal as a subcommittee, because I sort of see like staff's gonna reach out to whoever they need to for expertise or opinion. Do we, I don't know if that we need to formalize it. Maybe we do for certain topics. We have the option at any point in time to create a subcommittee.
Right, and there's no limitation on anybody working with our executive director. They could go in and they could go in before the meeting. Dan makes up his draft. Anyone from the board can go in there and they could discuss it and give all the information they need. There's that option.
Sorry.
Mary's got a Mary, you have a hand up?
A lot of different thoughts here, but I'm going to start by saying thank you to Director Hartman, because I think she nailed it on the head, that in these staff meetings, there's many different opinions going in, and that's when it's not just policy being implemented, but things being teed up, as we said, for your consideration. And this is where we feel like it would be nice to have representation. For Director Arona's thoughts and perspective, if you change public to stakeholders, ag has a huge percentage of stakeholders in the basin. And that's what makes this basin so much different than the CMA and the WMA. There's ag stakeholders in both, but the boundaries of the CMA are also the boundaries of the conservation district, sorry. And same with the WMA. So there is already involvement through those. But we have a huge area up top where there really isn't representation outside of the board. And I feel like there's some sort of concern that ag might be trying to take over or something. I don't believe that's we just would like to have a fair share of what's happening on whatever level. And we're only one of four. So I would be extremely disappointed if there was not an ag person somehow nominated to be part of the staff level. And I do think, I would prefer option one, obviously, but I understand the problems with option one. I think option two seems to be a nice give and take on both sides.
So
And I
Mary,
do think ag would feel much better in general if they felt like they were being taken.
so you were saying that the land Like you're saying, pointing out there, that's covered by Jones there. Jones representing A out there.
I'm sorry, Director Department, I'm not misquoting you, but I understand you to say that, she feels that her focus is de minimis water users. And I believe that's why she's been supportive of having, an ag representative on the board.
I should probably respond and say, my role is to represent all constituents. And I try my very best to do that. And to,
And do you feel your staff person then represents ag, and has there been any conversation between your staff person and anyone on ag prior to any of these meetings, during any of these meetings?
I think my staff is extremely well versed about ag, but I mean, I'm open to option two. I mean, if you've heard me saying, I think the brainstorming, the figuring out how to shape the policy options for the board would benefit from an a voice who's actually practicing in agriculture in our area. But I don't think it should be the same person. So that's why I think option two would work.
I mean, I think our director has recommended option two
Right.
to the board.
You take the more public.
Public.
Peter Garcia with ID Money Man, I just, want to add a little bit of context maybe to this discussion, in that it's interesting that what I've heard a little bit that ag's already represented in the WMA because it's covered by the Conservation District. I heard the very opposite in various other meetings that ag is not represented by the Conservation District. We all know that the Conservation District and the WMA has an equal obligation to represent City of Longview as it does ag. Here in the EMA, the Conservation District has an equal obligation to represent municipal users as it does ag. You're agnostic, so it's not representation in the other two areas. I too don't know why there's not a voting member in the other two areas and why it's not being insisted on like it is here, much less the insistence of an ag staff member. What I'll say here too on option two, just staff, obviously it's a board recommendation, and board decision. But I think bringing a member of the public into staff discussions of a public agency, the creation of the EMA GSA by the way of the JPA created a new public entity. Bringing a member of the public into discussions, and the JPA in and of itself is a common interest agreement among 4 member public agencies. Bringing a staff member into that structure, I just think it's important if the board is to pursue option 2, it's important for the board to understand that whatever type of privileged discussion may occur in these staff meetings, whether it's deliberative process, you're talking about drafts, whether it's the attorney participating and offering attorney-client privilege communication or advice, or offering attorney work product. Once you bring a member of the public into that discussion, and there's no way, we heard from legal counsel, to transmute that member of the public into something other than a member of the public. It does involve this board waiving that privilege. So if you're going to pursue that type of option number 2, I think there has to be a very, very circumspect effort into making sure that privileged documents and privileged communications are kept out of those types of discussions. So I wouldn't be bringing draft documents. I wouldn't be having the attorney participating in them, because if you bring a member of the public in, it waives privilege. Only you as a board holds that privilege. So if you decide to pursue option 2, you should do so knowing that you're forfeiting a right that the board otherwise has. It's just, you should do that with full knowledge in making that decision. So you're giving something up that is a new public entity you otherwise have. So you have to be real careful, because the moment you bring a member of the public into those discussions, everything is immediately subject to the Public Records Act request. Just, the board should be fully aware of that. I would have hoped to have heard a little bit more of that from legal counsel, because it's a very important right and privilege that you're surrendering when you do that. Thank you.
Carla, is that a hand up? I don't know.
Yeah, we have two comments. There are two hands raised online. So, Steve, you can unmute when you're ready.
I think, I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
No, we had,
Was that Steve Anderson or Steve O'Neill you asked to unmute?
it's Steve Anderson.
Oh, okay. Thanks very much. Hi, everybody. Steve Anderson. I'm legal counsel for ID1, and I concur with the statements that General Manager Peter Garcia just gave. The board is in a position of waiving privilege with respect to deliberative process and other items that are both shared and discussed, particularly if there's an attorney at these meetings. So it is important that you be careful about that. If the board really is inclined to do something like option number 2, I'd suggest that, and I think this was suggested by Mr. O'Neill earlier, that it's probably going to require an amendment to the JPA agreement and going back to the home boards to do that. I mean, the reason that the ag director can participate in your discussions and potentially even any closed sessions that your board has is because in the JPA agreement itself, the board and the member agencies sort of waive that privilege. They allowed and are allowing in an ag director into their fold for purposes of voting and again, participation in closed sessions and the like, where there's not a conflict. And that was done consciously. But if you're going to do that same kind of waiver with respect to a quote unquote staff member that's participating from the outside that really is just a member of the public, well, then you're going to have to waive that privilege again. And really the most appropriate way to do that would be to take that back to the home agencies who in the first instance waived the privilege for the ag director. So and allowed for that to happen. So thanks very much for the time. Appreciate it.
And I think I should respond to that, Mr. Chair.
Is that Steve O'Neill?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Steve Anderson, thanks for the comments. But, you know, when I think about the privilege issue and, you know, when I looked at the case laws, you know, and the way that attorney-client privilege is described is that the privilege attaches to communications between the attorney, the client, and those essential to further that communication. And so, you know, I'm not so sure. I'd love to say with absolute certainty that a privilege is going to be waived or not waived, but I think it's a little grayer than has been represented, in that if there is someone who goes through a process where a nomination is made and then this board appoints this rep to represent the ag community, a conversation or a meeting with that rep and the other staff members of the agency, I think it would, a court would more likely respect the privilege in that scenario. You know, because they would be you know, cloaked in some official, more official capacity than someone who just walked in off the street. And I understand your arguments, Steve, and I understand what Peter says, and those are very important and valid considerations. I don't want to say there's no risk, but I think a court would more likely uphold the privilege in a situation like that. So I don't want to get into a back and forth legal argument at this meeting, but I think there's less of a chance of privilege being waived than has been represented.
Okay, thank you. Joan?
Mr. O'Neill, could I follow up and ask your advice about Public Records Act? And if someone through the process described in option 2 were selected, would that open up deliberative drafts to the PRA?
Well, that would all go to the issue that we discussed as waiver. As I'm sure you know, Director, that, you know, drafts are not public records for purposes of the Public Records Act. However, if if it's been waived by disclosure through some other means. And I think the argument here would be that because this ag rep is a member of the public and not an employee of an agency, that constitutes the waiver that we kind of just discussed. So,
And you're saying you think there's enough formality around this that at least it's in a gray area and it wouldn't be waived.
that's my view at this point. Yes.
Other comments?
There's another hand raised from Alex online. Let me give you permission. You can unmute when you're ready, Alex.
Hi, thank you. My name is Alex Dominguez. I serve as legal counsel for the San Ynez Water Group. Very familiar with this group, the JPA. We participated heavily in that process. I've heard a lot of comments tonight and just wanted to provide some responses to those. First and foremost, regarding the issue of privilege. I'm right there with your counsel, Mr. O'Neill. Not sure that this would actually break any privileges, and even to the extent that we are concerned with that, without stepping on Mr. O'Neill's toes, I would think that there's a way to contract around that. I think that would be appropriate as well. Wearing a GSA legal counsel hat, among other things. That's also what I do. But to have that representative from the ag side sign some sort of non-disclosure agreement just to make sure that we are covering all bases. I don't think that that's something too far to ask. Second, I just wanted to discuss the issue of, hey, maybe we just have, there's various members of the public that can just call the executive director. I think we heard from the executive director that right now he's having to meet with the member agency or the public agency representatives and then hold a completely separate meeting for the ag representatives. And by having a sort of ag representative, we would be able to save him some time and just by combining those meetings. So I think, again, this would be a benefit for staff. Last but not least, the issue of precedence. While I can appreciate the desire to want to have an example to look from, just because there is not express precedence, I don't think means that we're excluded from doing this. Among other things, our office represents the Cuyama GSA. There, we have a technical working group where we allow landowners to assign certain technical representatives to hold, I'm not sure if it's weekly, but to hold regular meetings with the executive director in advance of board meetings to discuss various technical matters. That was something that we hadn't seen anywhere else, but that our landowners and our board thought was important to have. So, I think that there's ways here that we can make this happen. I think we are supportive, we being the San Ynez Water Group and the ag representatives would be supportive of number 2. And to the extent that there's any concerns, I think that we can contract around them. And that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. John?
Procedural question. If somebody made a motion in support of 2, does it need 3 votes or 4?
Steve?
I looked at that prior to the, let me just pull up the JPA again. Our JPA agreement identifies, as I'm sure you're familiar with, majority votes versus supermajority votes. And as I look at section 11.3 along with 9.1, I think this, in my view, this can be adopted pursuant to a majority vote and not a supermajority, and that you would not be retaining a new employee or retaining a consultant. as identified in the JPA. So my short answer is majority vote.
So we would be nominating a new individual, is that not right? And introducing a new procedure for that nomination.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
But we will be introducing a new procedure for that nomination of a new individual, is that not right? That's not requiring a supermajority?
Your supermajority approval is, I mean, he's talking about a new procedure. If it's an update to the GSP, that requires, I'm looking at the ones that I think are relevant. You're not changing your boundaries, you're not settling litigation, you're not adopting anything related to groundwater production, you're not adding a new member, you're not establishing a new fee, you are not amending, well, here you go, it would be, are you adopting or amending any new policies?
Procedure.
Yeah.
Is this a new policy or is this a, I don't know.
Like on bylaws and stuff, we're gonna have to change.
Yeah, but we don't have bylaws yet, so,
Yeah, or
you know, Director, you raised a good, is this a new policy? I was looking at it in terms of whether or not you're amending your bylaws, rules and regulations. Yeah, so I think frankly, being conservative, I think it would require 4 votes.
also while you're on that kind of subject there, I
Because
kind of like,
it also identifies procedures, which are really not formal policies, but I think this is, you're implementing a procedure for this agricultural representative. So frankly, I stand corrected. I'm going to say that it requires 4 votes.
okay. Also, I heard something I thought was interesting, a technical working group. Would that require, what kind of vote and changes would that require?
Creating a new, or like a new body or an advisory committee or something like that?
Yeah, water group's lawyer mentioned that. That sounded kind of interesting. He said it was working in UAM, I think.
It's kind of like the CAG that we have. I mean, you already have that.
Oh, it was like a cake.
Well,
I
it
thought it
sounds
was
like it.
technical, sound engineering. type.
Well, no, it's more focused on landowners. Yeah.
Maybe some more thought around when and what gets communicated through the CAG. Maybe the CAG is not being leveraged in the way it could be.
They have a CAG there too.
What's that?
I think they have a CAG there also.
Between them.
Separate from the technical work group?
Okay.
I don't really know for
Yeah,
sure.
that's interesting. You know, one thing I want to kind of bring it back. I think we all want something. I like, you know, I wish you guys were a district. I wish you were full. I want that so bad. I want that. So we all want it to happen. It's just how it's going to happen. Sounds like with the attorney, there's more work that needs to be discussed and looked at.
So we have a recommendation from our director for option 2. I'll make a motion that we accept option 2.
For the 2 years, or Joan had made a comment about trying it for 6 months. So I think the recommendation here is for 2 years. There's some time involved in trying to nominate and get someone to agree to do it. I don't know if they're gonna be amenable to a 6-month,
You go 1 year,
trial.
1 year for starters, or?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to make my motion for 1 year and you can see the value.
I just comment even before second one comes in, I can't in good conscience make that kind of decision without taking it back to my own agency and organizations I have. At the end of the day, I represent the city of Salt Lake, so there's enough gray area in this, I would have to disclose to our own attorneys where we might be exposed.
And I think too, we need legal. He just said you can't just do this off of a recommendation. It's gotta be put into the ordinance or something. Sound like that's what he felt comfortable doing.
Okay,
Um,
it's gonna, yeah. Go ahead.
So that would be the direction I mean, maybe that would be the right motion to make, is to give some direction to do that. If that's what you want to pursue.
Let's have Mr. O'Neill clarify what he read.
Steve, O'Neill, did you have something to say?
No, I was just confused by, I don't understand what the motion is now. Is the motion to move with option 2 for 1 year, and is that motion seconded?
Second.
Now it's been seconded, so comment, I guess.
Yep, that's what it was. But
Okay.
can that be implemented?
Yeah, spelled out. Awesome.
Mr. O'Neill?
And is the question is, can it be implemented?
Yeah, because before I sputtered, you said it's gotta,
Changing bylaws that we don't have.
you're right.
One more time?
I think the question is, what mechanism could be utilized to implement option 2? Like,
I believe,
is it,
I believe we'll take a supermajority vote.
and then would be adopted through motion or resolution or
Yeah.
direction to staff or ordinance or bylaws? That type of mechanism is, I think, what the question is.
Well, do you recall how it was before my time, how the agricultural representative was selected?
It's put in our,
It's in our JPA.
yeah, it's in the JPA.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the mechanism. Dan, do you recall, did we do a resolution or did we do a just by motion?
I believe it was just by motion. I don't know that we had a formal resolution.
Okay.
No, for the approval of Doug Circle and Mary Kay as the actor.
That's in the JPA.
JPA.
It's
This
in the,
language is to amend the JPA. This language to nominate.
yeah, it's in the JPA.
But this.
Well, I think the question Steve is asking, what was the formal mechanism that we took, not to establish the process for how an director, but to literally appoint Doug as the ag director following the process in the JPA. And I don't believe it was a resolution. We can look back in the meeting minutes. I likely was
Yeah.
I think it was a vote, but.
Well, yeah, no, it was a vote, yeah.
There's the second question, which is how does the procedure live inside the JPA now? Because that needs to be an amendment. As a result of the action. I think that's your question.
Yeah, and kind
How
of
does
all,
it execute it?
yeah.
Well,
Steve, go ahead.
I'd say that you could act by motion.
You get to direct staff to develop a resolution. That resolution can go back. You could, and Steve, jump in here when I screw this up. You could direct staff to adopt bylaws, of which this could be one. You could direct staff to draft an ordinance that the board could consider. I mean, I think there's a variety of mechanisms for how
Yeah,
you could do it.
yeah, as a general rule, I think you probably all know this, but this AG can act by motion, resolution, or ordinance. In this situation, yeah, we could direct staff to return with an ordinance implementing the motion that's been proposed, the 1-year term on option 2.
I think Alex has to say, but.
That's what they use for the comments.
Go ahead.
I think we have to close it. Not too much.
Alex, you can unmute.
Yeah, thank you so much for the additional time here. My only thought is, you know, I don't know if we are maybe overcomplicating the issue. I mean that with the utmost respect. um, the way that I have seen this position, the way that we've discussed this position with Doug and some of the others, is that we're just looking to get a staff member, an employee, a representative in those staff meetings, because those staff meetings have become largely organizational, planning based, and policy implementation. To have an ag voice in there to help guide that, that's what we're trying to do. To say that, we're trying to create a formal position or anything else like that, I'm just not sure that that's really the length that we're going to here. In my opinion, a motion to authorize a ag staff, quote unquote, staff member to participate, subject to non-disclosure agreement as drafted by legal, something like that, I think could solve this and let us keep trucking forward and allow other business to continue. But that's just a suggestion, and I'll stop there.
Is your motion done?
To include the NDA?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll update the motion. And, I think we have a motion, if you all told me a second, I think we go to a vote. If it doesn't pass, I need to report that back, to Arthur, so.
So now you dropped your other motion. The motion is to have staff come up with a pathway. Is that what you said?
It's the same motion, in addition, direction to develop a non-disclosure agreement for the, for whomever would be selected to the process.
Since Mr. Dominguez spoke, are you still taking public comment? I'm a little confused.
What was that, Peggy?
Are we still?
We kind of opened it back up to
Because there's another hand raised online.
Okay.
Okay, Steve Emerson, you can unmute.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I hope I'm not taking up too much time, but I was confused by what Mr. Dominguez said. What I heard your counsel say was that there might be a cloak of protection if you go through an extensive process of selection of this third party, and I don't think it can be a consultant personally. That could, I think, and I don't want to speak for you, Steve O'Neill, but I think you said if this process were observed, that would bring this person under the umbrella or within the bubble of the EMA sufficiently to protect privileges. But what I heard Mr. Dominguez just say is he doesn't want to go through any kind of process. He just wants somebody appointed. Sort of short circuit, number one. And number two, I don't think a non-disclosure agreement defeats the waiver of privilege. Those are different concepts. You can't sign a non-disclosure agreement and control the courts and when privilege is waived and when it's not. So, and then the third thing is, I guess I have some confusion about, even if someone were appointed and attended those meetings, they couldn't talk to anybody in the ag community about what happened in those meetings, right? Because they'd be within the bubble and all that would be privileged. So I'm confused as to exactly what that person would do, especially if they signed a non-disclosure agreement. They wouldn't be able to talk to anybody about what they said or what was said at that meeting. So there's just a whole bunch of questions in my mind. And again, I'd appreciate any input your council has. Thank you.
Yes, Steve or Anderson, this is O'Neill. I can respond. I agree that I don't think an NDA is going to trump, the evidence code or any other statutes. However, what I think the motion that's before the body right now is the process with the nomination process involved, except that it's changed to have a 1 year time period.
You got a comment?
Just real quick, so it sounds like we want to approve the conceptual process that Director Heimel, or the motion to approve the conceptual process that Director Heimel put forward. I did just want to point out that I heard Supervisor Hartman say that she wanted the same process and that one item was omitted from the JPA that is not in this conceptual process. And that's that the person be a resident registered voter within the boundaries of the GSA. And so if you would like to keep it the same, you might need to have that in there, just a quick.
That's huge. I mean, I think, that limits, that limits the pool of potential people if they have to be living in the space, and it also contradicts the language that's here that says, if they're, if they're representing somebody in the EMA as an employee, that they could be that person. And I don't think the current staff members are all living in the EMA. They're staff members of the agency, not necessarily living. So
Yeah.
I mean, the language that's here is slightly broader in order for us to use employees that are representing organizations that are farming here in the EMA, but not living. So that's the important point.
Yeah, I'm so glad that, that point was raised. For me, it's really critical that the ag person be an ag person who lives in the district. And I said that in my comments, and I guess I missed that in this. So I would either, I guess I have to withdraw my second, because that to me is critical. But if we could have a motion that included that, then I would second it.
This is far as we're taking public comments, still it seems, great, I think great discussion tonight. For the record, for the real clear record, ID1 originally and has continued to be the strongest advocate for having an ag representative on this board and for having ag participation. So I want that to be clear from our staff's perspective. Two, there's been a lot of discussion about this option 2, which I think we've heard support for, maybe some concerns and maybe some mitigation measures to make it more palatable, including an NDA that, again, insofar as this board and legal counsel for the GSA are okay with the privilege issues, but there's still a remnant concern about tidying up the disclosures through an NDA. Insofar as this board is sort of waiving those things or evaluating the pros and cons of those, why wouldn't the board as a complete package want to see that proposed NDA language that the member of the public is going to sign as part of the procedure that's being adopted? Because that's in effect what's giving the protection that you're looking for, or helping to do that, according to Mr. Dominguez. So in terms of whether what's being proposed is an adoption of a bylaw, a rule, a regulation, a procedure, all of the above, none of that's really agendized. What it seems like tonight is there may be some coalescing around the idea of an option 2 with various ads. It seems that, direction to staff to bring a full package back as either a proposed bylaw, resolution, or ordinance, or whatever it is the most sort of provincial way to go about it.
Thank you. Any other comment?
So I think in terms,
There've been enough issues raised. It probably just needs to be architected into something that could address all the issues that were raised. I'll put that out there.
So we can make a motion that we ask staff to elaborate on option 2 for us and come back next meeting.
Okay,
Just, Mr. Chair, just some scorekeeping here. There still is an original motion that was seconded. That second is withdrawn. So you need to address what's happening with that original motion before we go to a second motion.
That's fine. I'll go ahead and add a second then to Doug's motion that was amended since Joan withdrew her second.
Okay,
Call the question.
motion. I still don't know what is the motion? It's been all over the place. What is
adopt staff recommendation 2 on.
adopt staff recommendation of option 2? Is that what you said?
Yeah, and for the.
And for 1 year and a confidentiality type agreement that they would work out to go with that, to protect the privilege of staff by this new person that would be nominated and appointed to the position.
But no requirement that they live in the district.
We can talk about that. I mean, if
But
they're
that's
working in the district and they live in Santa Barbara County, would that be palatable to you? I mean, that way they have knowledge of the area. They just might not be in the exact boundary of the EMA, which is a very small, area.
For me, that's a requirement that they live in the farm here.
I think that's the only way we get it accomplished. We'll have to find somebody with that guideline, but, I think that was an issue. We had a lot of people that were important farmers in the EMA that had representatives living, in Los Alamos or living in, Hilton, and so they didn't qualify because of that, but they were still farming of very large operations here in the EMA, so. But if that's the only way we achieve the goal, then I'll go with living here and we'll find someone in that category. I amend my motion.
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay, do a roll call vote on that?
Director
Hey,
Circle.
Can I,
Oh, wait.
Go ahead, Steve.
I just want to make sure the minutes are clear. The motion now is to implement option 2 with a 1-year term for the ag representative. Also to have that ag representative execute some type of non-disclosure agreement. And that ag representative must be a resident of within the EMA GSA boundaries.
Correct.
Thank you. And it requires 4 votes for approval.
Let's do a roll call vote.
I guess, so I just want to make sure that I'm clear. Is this a motion to then have staff come back with a resolution or some other document? This is approval.
No, you're-
See that.
Give me direction
See
here.
what it says.
So direction, not,
To implement option 2 as stipulated.
Specific option 2 as defined here. Your qualifications and criteria. Plus living in the.
Yeah, I think the NBA is kind of like the forms. We can figure that out later. It doesn't have to be important. That's my view.
that's helpful. Thank you. Okay, all right.
Yeah, roll call vote.
Director Circle.
Yes.
Director Arona.
No.
Director Hartman.
Yes.
Director Merriman.
Yes.
Chair Jones.
No.
Okay, so the motion failed.
Okay. So from here, you're gonna come back with some, revisit this with some, a little more fine tuning.
I would look to the board for direction on where to move forward from here.
I think we're all in agreement. We want to have some representation. How it gets there, if we're not in agreement of, I'd like to see some options expanded. This is my point. On all, even a new option that gets us there. If it's option 2, but modification, that'd be fine. I don't care. But
Could you suggest the modifications that would win your vote?
I can't. I'll tell you why. I, with all due respect, feel that I need to take anything that will modify the JPA back to the agency and back to my legal counsel. So I would not feel comfortable doing it without that extra step brought into the process. So it'll take a little bit more time. I would also like to hear more about a technical subcommittee. I'll call it a subcommittee because it sounds like we can already use that mechanism and it can probably be implemented very quickly. And that keeps, it could give us the form of all the benefit that you're looking for, information, influence, input, but minimizing risk of exposure for freedom of information, public records, public participation, and disclosure that might just inhibit staff from working very openly, which is how they're working today.
Me, I like to see a district form and maybe we have some interim steps that we can use to place a person on there. But I'm really adamant about seeing the districts over all agency here. That's what I like to see.
So when you say interim, what would, fun for you?
I'm not certain, I'm no brainchild on it, but I wanna make sure it covers all of our bases and,
But I think we're not giving staff very much to work
Yeah,
with.
we need to give them direction. I think, you know, forming an agency, I agree with you, and I wish that agriculture had done that 7 years ago. We wouldn't have this issue today, but we didn't. And now when we're expecting ag to pay 80% of the pumping charges, you know, the additional legal cost and process and a number of years to accomplish it. I don't know that our timing's ideal when they're stepping up to an 80% charge that they didn't have any charge. They're stepping up to 80% where they didn't have a charge before. And I think it should be taken into consideration that we're asking a lot of ag in terms of paying the bills, just like we asked a lot of the agencies to help fund us in the early, years. But, the pendulum has switched where ag's paying 80% of the bill going forward. And
You keep saying that, Doug, but our agencies are the only ones that have paid so far, so.
well, but I mean, we have a mechanism in place for ag to pay 80% going forward.
but, also on that point, Doug, I know ID1 and Solvang, the county probably too. We have invested millions, and I mean millions, I think it's over $70 million into diversification to protect the groundwater. We spent customers, citizens, a lot of money and we continue to do that to protect our rights. So that's why I'm really kind of adamant. Plus, you do make a point. Agriculture pumps 80%. Now, when we had windmills and cattle roaming the ground, those windmills made no impact, okay? I know they didn't. But now we are making an impact, it's noted. So, and that's really my whole reason. I really want ag involved because you'll be part of the solution. That is my big point there. But we have invested, we continue to buy water from the state and we pay for canals and piping and pumping to bring it here. We pay big money into that.
Yeah, no, I understand. You raised another interesting point that's happening throughout agriculture, including our community, and I'm sure you see vineyards that are being pushed out up and down the freeway. And, Pacific Ag Water, which is the largest irrigation company in this region, closed their doors this month because they don't have any business planting, new crops, whether it's grapes or any other crops. They're irrigation company. So I think, the curtailment by agriculture is happening from an economic consequence. So some of the figures thinking agriculture was going to grow in the GSP may be overstated given the current economic conditions. And, we'd appreciate it if you all would drink more wine.
That's a good point, but also every citizen's invested in their house here. And without water here, that value of the house goes for average one, like over $1 million nowadays around here. Without water, that goes zip. So everybody has invested interest in that groundwater, protecting it, not just, ag, and they pull up their crops and move on. We live here, we stay here. So it's very important we protect the groundwater. So I appreciate what you're saying. I do see the vineyard ripped up. I didn't know if they're leaving or if they're gonna plant a new variety. But, it's domestic water use is important too.
Absolutely. And we want to give direction to our staff on this subject, or do you feel like you have that direction?
I don't know that I've got that. We can obviously explore some of the legal, questions. Legal counsel can explore some of these legal questions. It sounds like I don't know it may be a bit of a gray area, but if there are certain things that the directors, do want to see in future proposals, other than just them more fleshed out, if we can bring back a resolution or some other mechanism, we can talk with legal about whether or not bringing back an NDA would be helpful. I kind of heard both sides, that I don't know that really adds a lot, but we can explore that. So that's I guess what I've heard.
There's no action required there based on the vote. But what I think we just gave you was an ask to go double click on a technical subcommittee or a technical work group or some other use of a subcommittee or what existing body to deliver the same function, but acts as a separated entity or meeting body that the ag team could feel they have the same level of influence to the agenda. That was the point that was being made, and technical input and access to Dan or even other staff.
And I like that, and I think I'll go back and I'll brainstorm and I'll come up with an alternative. I can do that because, if it's so desired, then no staff meeting. Let's just block them out. And then Dan prepares agendas and packages 10 days in advance to give us plenty of time to review. If that makes you happy, that's an option too.
Yep, that's his option 5, I think.
Which we rejected.
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure the technical working group is what we want to do here. I mean, we were trying to embed somebody in the ag community, not Mary or Doug, working with staff to do what Joan said, which is to tee up the important issues, make sure we got the right priority so that, and things are getting vetted across all of the stakeholders in this process, and then come to this committee. And there's got to be some bias for urgency here because we've got the grant and we've got maybe more time, but we want to move out effectively, and we're still kind of stumbling here tonight.
I think we're moving.
Well,
And like you say, technically, I don't know technically, maybe you do. I don't. I want to hear more on this technical thing that your lawyer said.
But my concern with that is it's another group. It's another thing that he's got to go interface with as opposed to being part of the process with the staff. And I think it's important that we have that ag voice in those meetings so that things get vetted and we don't keep kicking things back and forth between this level and staff like we did tonight.
Get rid of staff then. Just have Dan. We hired you, paying you the big bucks, to get it done. And if that makes everyone happy, and then it just comes, and then we'll have the hashing out at the meeting.
So I guess it does bring up a question. Like, we need staff. Because initially we put the staff meetings in place, we preserved what was going on when we formed the JPA, meaning we left continuity in place and some acceleration of Dan's ramp into the role. So I didn't want to have this discussion, but it does beg the question.
We already discussed this actually when we heard it from Dan today, that the staff really takes a lot of burden off his shoulders, has a lot of historic knowledge and can pull a lot together. We're shooting ourselves in the foot not to have that process in place. And so I think we're just pulling things out of the hat to say, we don't really want to say yes or no finally about this. And I think we should either, pitch or cut bait. Are we going to give direction that's meaningful so that staff can go back and not waste their time and tee up something that's going to make this get enough votes to pass? Or are we locked in this 3-2 and it's not going anywhere? And I think we need to make that decision.
I need more information. I'm going to see more options. So yeah, I'm locked in with my vote. I'm not changing yet until I see a better option.
Then
I don't know, Joan. I got to go back and think. I'll talk with my board and see what my board has to say. That my board may tell me, no, you're good to go. Go ahead, because I'm only 1 to 5 there.
Okay, Dan, find a way. That's what I'm hearing. Yeah, we can brainstorm, we can come up, I have other mechanisms, let's see what we can come up with.
Or just, I mean, we've got people saying they'll bring us more options, they will contribute, so maybe we just put it on the agenda again.
So you should put it on the agenda so that it's on the agenda.
Yes.
We have to do that.
Continuing item,
Okay,
very good.
can we get moving here? Back to the chair.
Okay, moving on, let's go to 5. New EMA GSA well permit approval from EHS.
That's just information only.
Dan?
Yeah, we received from EHS, as they promised, any new process, well permit approvals, we reviewed it. We thought that if they filled out the form to the necessary standard, and we were presenting it to the EMA board, as we had promised to do in our previous meetings. Yeah, informational item only.
And so this well is for domestic, right? Less than 2 acre feet.
That is the box that they checked under anticipated water production.
So this comes.
Could I speak to that? We are the property owner. It's an ag well. It's not a domestic well.
It's an acre.
It's an ag well, yes. The only well, which will be the only well on that property. Never been a well there before.
Did say new well, but it said it's less than 2 acre feet.
No, it will be,
It's what the paperwork says.
it shouldn't have said that.
Yeah, now are you the owner, you're saying?
Yes.
Oh, and the person that filled it out was the well driller, right?
Then he filled it out incorrectly. I haven't seen that.
Yeah,
But it will be metered, it's metered, it will be metered.
How many acres is it, sir?
18.
Okay.
Profitable.
That's not stupid.
That points out to a problem with our process if we're not getting proper information.
Dan, you want to take that back to them?
We can take this back to EHS.
Right,
with
just
the
let them
input and figure out how to try to resolve that issue. Yeah, and then bring back
If you, I mean,
an
also,
amended application.
if you reconcile the depth and size of the well, it's inconsistent with the,
10-inch spacing,
Right.
600 feet.
yeah, 600 feet. More than
Some of that data is right. I mean, my computer just died, so I can't pull it up, but it did say less than 2 acre.
Yeah, they're gonna correct it.
Yeah, that shouldn't have been there.
It was flagged as irrigation and domestic, so I mean, that part potentially was correct, but the anticipated volume was felt like incorrect.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Tell them we
Come back.
appreciate sending this, but they need to make sure those things are correct. Okay. Next item. 5B, Prop 68 grant update.
maybe in the interest of time, I'll keep this brief, and, we are continuing to work on implementation and all components of the grant, we're collecting data for the demonstration project, kicking off component 5, looking at updated work implementation plans and cash flow projections, and we'll bring more information back to the board as necessary or beneficial, but happy to answer any questions the board may have about those initiatives for the grant.
Okay, everything's going fine, and especially with the extension.
The extension definitely creates a good bit of breathing room. Obviously, we haven't got it formally, and we're working fast to do that. The DWR is reviewing the extension request this week.
Are we the only one submitting an extension request?
I believe,
The other areas are,
They're part of ours.
yeah.
for in the Sandy Hills Basin, it's all one grant, so it's an extension for all the management areas. But I believe other GSAs that I have talked to have requested extensions and are working on processing them as well.
Okay, very good. Item 6. Next meeting, yeah, 6A is for Thursday, October 23rd, 4 PM here.
Yeah, that's current meeting. We haven't thought through the agenda for that yet. We'll look at what items we have and items of certain urgency and then make a recommendation. But yeah, the next meeting would be regularly scheduled here on October 23rd.
Okay, anything? No. Okay, board director reports, requests, future agenda items. Doug mentioned bring back that one.
Bring back options.
Yeah, with options, but
Yeah, obviously, but also, Dan, I think we did some workshops a couple of weeks ago. Maybe on the agenda next time, there'll be some feedback from those workshops.
Specifically the action plan workshops?
Yeah.
Yeah, we could bring back a report on that.
We'll be able to be at that meeting just like that.
Okay. Yeah, well, let's talk through that, Tim. We'll figure out a game plan.
good. No other agenda items? No, Joan's ready to go. She's in position.
Sorry, no, I did have one.
Sorry, Joan. Sorry, time to get you out.
We did receive an application for, being a member of the Citizens Advisory Group. I don't believe we have an open solicitation currently, but we could consider bringing that application to the board for their consideration at a future meeting, if the board was interested.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, you know, run it past the keg if they have anything to say about it. But, yeah.
Yeah. I think the way to do that is to have a CAG meeting, which we could do. I guess it might be easier just to get board direction.
Okay. I thought they had.
We don't have regularly scheduled meetings. My vision is that, you know, with the 5-year eval, will be up for the GSP, that I would like to sort of ramp up the CAG's participation and review of that initiative and others as appropriate, but I think that's a very significant, important initiative. It's similar to how the CAG was very involved in the development of the GSP. I think it would be valuable to have the CAG very involved in the completion of the 5-year eval.
Sounds good. Anything else? Adjourn.